Oh, good morning, everyone. It's the Hobby Breakfast Show, kicking off your morning
Again.
with Wargaming Chats. Oh, and look, as always, it's your hosts. We have the world's cheeriest man, OT.
Hi.
But your voice is
His
fucked.
voice is
My
not sounding
voice
good.
is so fucked.
I'm going to make him do all the talking today. We have the mayor as well.
Good morning, everyone.
I'm here, as always, not contributing.
Classic Onod being here.
And we also have returning guest, Sebastian.
Hello.
We might as well just make him a host at this point. But
Yeah.
Then we'd have to pay him.
What? We're getting paid, are we?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Don't tell him about.
Massive revenue from YouTube.
Yeah, all those juicy views.
We're currently splitting it 50-50. We don't want to cut him in. Yes, we're talking about tournaments today.
Oh.
Here we go.
Brilliant.
That was the best intro we've ever done. We went to an event.
We went to Defence of the North in Bristol.
Thank you.
Which was a GBHL. What was it? Was it
100.
80? 90? It was 100, was it? Jesus.
Oh.
That explains a lot.
20.
With 30 teams, doubles event, 400 points each, which, as you'll know, viewer, is the perfect amount of points if you want to take bears. So what we'll do is we will go through each round, and we'll go through how we got on, and you can follow our little journey through the tournament. Isn't that exciting?
I'm excited.
We're going to go first because OT and Onod will bring you down otherwise. So, actually, well, our first game's against Bears, but yours was Dragon Emperor, so it's not that much better, is it?
Yes, and I think that is just a flavour of the tournament, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's lots of Bears and Dragon Emperor. Excuse me, Dragon Emperors around.
Yeah.
So, what was the first? Well, let's just quickly go over what our lists were first, shall we? My and Sebastian's list was Goblin Town. We took the Goblin King, Golem, the Scribe, Grinner, 2 captains and 2 mercenary captains, with 19 Goblin mercenaries and 70 goblins. I can't remember exactly how many models that gave us. I think it was like 96. 96, cool. So a lot of models at 800 points. We didn't take Spider Queen or anything like that because I don't have the models. But even if we did, I think this was just kind of, I don't know. We didn't want to take anything too cheeky, but we thought this would be pretty strong on its own, regardless. So, what was your list, Onod and OT?
Oh, I brought Elrond and some red knights, and one of them had a banner. Right, OT, and I brought Aragorn with a horse. Oh God, what else did he have? Armor and a bow. That's right.
Okay.
Bill,
Bill the Pony.
Frodo, Sam, Merry Pippin, and Arwen with Asphaleth and Elven Cloak. All right, yeah.
So probably the fluffiest list, I would have said, of the tournament.
I think it was the only list with fluff.
Well, I mean, arguably ours is fluff.
Our list was a lovely little sheep. And he got murdered and sent to an abattoir where it was turned into some low quality Tesco mint.
Brilliant.
That was what happened. I mean, we didn't actually do that badly. We did fine considering the garbage we brought. Isn't that right, OT? Oh, yes, we did pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to my and Sebastian's first game then. So what was the first mission?
So from games, I believe game 1, game 3, and the last game were all double scenarios.
Yeah.
I am
And
trying to
2 and 4 were
singles.
singles.
So I might have to get my match play.
The first one, I don't think we were placing objectives. I think there was one in the middle, and then it's like a shape of the 5 on a die, so like a cross. And it's just 2 points for each objective you're sitting on. 1 if it's contested, but you have more. None if it's fully contested. Total conquest, that's it. I think there's a point for wounding leader and a point for breaking. Is that right? But it's not like 1 for breaking, 3 for being unbroken.
So the scenario basically means that the primary forces have to deploy within 6 inches of the central objective.
Oh, yes.
And
And the rest is Maelstrom.
Yeah, then you
Or
get
5 inches in our game, as it turned out.
yes, with your uber accurate measuring sticks.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's a Maelstrom scenario. 4 of the objectives are placed around in a kind of the typical 5 snake eye kind of formation. And you get 2 victory points for having an objective with at least 1 of your models and no enemies within 3. You get 1 victory point for each objective marker that's got both friendly and enemy, but more friendly within 3. 1 for causing a wound on the leader, and 1 for breaking.
Yeah. So basically, it's all about the objectives. So we didn't really care about breaking as long as it didn't happen near the end of the game. And we deployed, obviously, in the middle, thinking, let's just absolutely obliterate the first force as fast as we can, so that by the time the second force of Beornings gets here, hopefully they arrive at the same time as the rest of our force, and we can just kind of crunch them up. As it happened, I think we pretty much whiffed in the first 2 rounds of fighting, didn't we?
I don't think we won a single round of combat in the first 2, like at least the first round of combat. I think we might have won 1 or 2 in the next combat, but we didn't kill anything.
Yeah, we failed to kill anything, and I think pretty much every combat they won with someone, they killed 2 goblins, pretty much. So it was a pretty shit start, and we thought, oh, Goblin King, let's just put him on Beorning so we can get some early kills. But and luckily you persuaded me out of doing a heroic combat because he then whiffed against 1 Beorning. You can see in the first image there, the Beornings have come on from the back there. I think we lost the first priority, which was good because we saw where they came on, and we just thought, well, we don't want to go anywhere near that, so we're just going to run towards the middle with everything we have. And of course, we've got 2 units of mercenaries in reserve to think about as well. So we're thinking we'll just bring them on on the hill there and the other piece of terrain probably. So in the next slide, image 3, you can see the Beornings are kind of making their advance, and we're still kind of hitting it up in the middle. Our goblins on the left there just kind of marched forward as fast as they could towards the centre. We knew the other bear was going to get there pretty quick, so we just needed to make sure that we took as much of the board as we could. And fortunately, it was just kind of a grind from there. I think we killed a lot of the Beornings kind of mid-games.
And start to win combats because they just started to not roll 6s. And once we won a combat, piercing striking goblins with double the amount of strikes just means that you need 2 4+s with about 12 dice.
Yeah.
So they just started to really sort of crumble. We knew that the scenario was basically just in our favor, and as long as we had 3 or 4 goblins per objective, it was going to be really difficult for them to come back. And once we'd broken them, it would just sort of start to get to that point where the game would start to end. But I can't remember if it's on a 1 or 2, or if it was 20%.
I think either way, we were slowly running out of time, and we jumped the Goblin King and Golem onto Bjorn there for a couple of turns and killed him. Unfortunately, I think they broke us in like the last turn. So our Goblin Mercs came on in that terrain piece on the right there with the palm tree in the middle of it, and the hill behind that, just to kind of swarm the objectives, get behind the bears and Beornings. So we've taken out Bjorn. Grim Bjorn was absolutely wreaking havoc on the left side. By the time our forces had got to that hill in the middle, I think he did 1 hurl and killed 9 goblins. He was just able to get in a really good position. And on the one hand, that was epic and very nicely done. But also, how many points is that? Like, not very many. So we were kind of like, fine, you can do that. So they ended up breaking us. We had models everywhere. We were on every objective, but we were contesting the middle objective, I think. So
yeah,
all they could do. Sorry, go
on. I was going to say we ended up having more models in the middle.
Yes.
But we also managed to, in the last couple of turns, get Gollum and the King onto Beorn, and having trapped him, just managed to do a lot of wounds to him. So I think over the course of winning over two turns, we managed to kill Beorn as well.
Yeah. And as a last-ditch effort in the last slide, you can see they sent Grimbeorn to where the scribe and his three mates were. Knowing it was the last turn, I can't remember. I think they were just hoping that because they were now within 3 of it, that all of our models would just flee and they'd have an objective. But of course, the scribe passed, and then they all stood fast. So, and every other objective, we managed to have goblins passing their courage tests. So ultimately, we won 10-1 in our first game against Bears, which was really promising. Yeah, I mean, we just had model count. It was an objective-based game. I think we played it fine. So that was our first game. Nice. Pretty happy with that. Although it was a little bit scary thinking someone else is going to have absolutely smashed their opponent as well, and we're going to have to play them next. So, yeah, let's move on to your game 1 then. And here we go. Against the Dragon Emperor, of course.
Yeah, against the Dragon Emperor.
We faced the whole lot this weekend.
Nice easy dub for you there.
It was a nice easy dub. So it was the Dragon Emperor, like just a full phalanx, and then there was a little side force led by Artabi and some other shit.
Bro gear.
Bro gear. That was there were no I think there was one of the little dragon things.
Yeah, I saw that.
The War Drake, which nobody knows what it looks like.
Was it any good?
Not really. Aragorn killed it.
I mean, when it's facing Aragorn, you can't really judge it by that.
I mean, it had 2 wounds, so it was able to sort of tie up Aragorn for a turn, but it didn't really do a lot, to be honest. I couldn't comment how good it was, really. Yeah, so we had to deploy Elrond in the middle. Yeah, we used Aragorn's 3 point of might to get him on the board edge behind Elrond, so we're able to link our forces up. And as you can see in Image 1, we just ran away. A theme of the weekend, I would say. You can see there, hashtag measuring stick gate.
Absolute bullshit.
Our opponent plays dwarves, and so had a custom measuring stick for 5 inches, which he then hadn't realised that he'd brought with him rather than a 6-inch one. So we played he was like, "Oh, I've got this measuring stick. We can use this," and it was like, we played with that for like the first 3 turns. Now, I think it actually benefited us more because they were moving their Easterlings 5 inches a turn rather than 6.
Wow, how I'm so dialed into knowing like how far things can move now. I can just do it by eye. I'm surprised no one picked up on it.
Not everyone has the magical gift of just being able to move things exactly 6 inches.
I just know exactly what 6 inches looks like. Yeah. I don't know how. It must just be somehow ingrained into me. I don't know how.
You do know exactly what 3 inches looks like, though. Hey-o.
He just doubles it.
Yeah, I just double it. Yeah.
This is great banter. I'm sure nobody has ever made that joke on an MSG podcast before. We're such trail.
They probably haven't, they? Now, they brought in their force on the flank, so we probably should have just fucking run away. I think, as always, I was there just saying we should run away, and OT was like, I don't want to, and it was just like, oh. So there were a few disagreements about this over the weekend. and they usually, I would say, favoured me in terms of sensible decision making. It has to be said.
Why does that not surprise me?
We'll come
Sorry,
on.
OT.
We'll come on to later this game where OT made an interesting decision, which backfired on us. We got a nice little thing where Elrond yeeted in Wrath of Beornings and knocks their 3 cav models off, including the drummer. So they didn't have any cav for the rest of the game, which is at which point we should have fucking got out of there. But the phalanx had kind of reached us. We managed to get in some nice little bits at the beginning. So Aragorn killed Ratabi in a single turn of combat, which was pretty impressive.
Nice.
Yeah, because I charged in, doubling attacks.
Just rolled a lot of 6s, basically.
Yeah.
And I might have spent some might on it. I can't remember anymore.
But I think you burned a free one and another point of might to kill her.
Wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, that was pretty good because that dealt with kind of one of their threats. So they only really had the Dragon Emperor and Brogir left, and Brogir ended up using all of his spells and I can't even remember really what he did. I don't.
He tremored a couple of knights off their horses, but because he was worried about us just resisting, he was having to actually line them up a bit awkwardly around our heroes. So it only killed a couple of knights.
He deliberately was like not tremoring our heroes, and we were like, "That's fine because we got to keep our heroes and horses." So you can see image 4. They kind of had started to sandwich us. We'd pretty much broken the initial force that we fought against.
Yeah.
But if you're wondering where the hobbits are, they had just run off and
walked.
Well, yeah, they walked. There was in the first turn I moved the hobbits 4 inches, and my opponent then went, "Do you want to move the hobbits?" And I was like, "I have." That nice. Kind of summarized quite nicely.
And you couldn't even use his 5-inch measuring.
I know.
No.
But the hobbits they basically had like a few turns of being shot at by the 2 like token bows that the Eastlings had brought as they slowly walked over to the objective. Then they just sat there for the rest of the game. So they served their purpose. We in later games realized that actually Frodo and Sam are much more useful with all of the combat heroes, so we can use their might, and Merry and Pippin are the
fucking useless.
Obviously.
So we got to the point where essentially the Dragon Emperor couldn't get through his own troops to get to us. So he was just sitting there being a very expensive, albeit quite good banner. And we decided to like bring out our troops because it was getting towards the end of like the timer. And I was kind of going to OT. We need to think about the objectives here. We've got 1. They've got 1 Easterling literally sat on 3 objectives. We can just use our horses, get over to those 3. And we can get a 3-2 win quite easily. OT, rather controversially, decided that he could kill 2 more Eastlings with Elrond on the way out. And so rather than charging, rather than moving the full 15 that he could have done because Aragorn marched, he left himself, and then the Dragon Emperor charged him because clearly we didn't pre-measure that very well. I say we, royal we, OT didn't measure very well. And then the Dragon Emperor killed Elrond because he had no might left, and I was like, you moron.
But what Elrond did do was, like, the whole game, you can see in picture 4, like, he literally held back a huge section of their forces by himself.
Elrond basically soloed that phalanx whilst Aragorn killed the other army. So yeah, but we could have got our leader out without taking a wound, which was
And then as soon as he was wounded, I was like, "Fuck it, you might as well die." So we just went out in a blaze of glory. Except it wasn't a blaze of glory; he just died.
He could have got us an objective. Anyway,
it is always quite tempting to try and get a couple more kills or whatever, but sometimes you've just got to go on objectives.
What ended up happening is Arwen just flew across the board, 12-inch move.
Really good.
She just killed the 1 Easterling that they'd left because she got a charge bonus, and Arwen with 2 attacks at fight 6 is enough to kill 1 Easterling. So we had 2 objectives, and then Aragorn and Bill were on the middle objective, soloing the Dragon Emperor and the remaining Eastlings who were coming in. They did very well.
Bill won a combat.
Bill won a combat against 4 Easterlings who had trapped him. Aragorn was able to take on the Dragon Emperor 2 turns in a row and didn't die, but he couldn't win the combats. But we just didn't have the numbers. So they capped 3 objectives, we capped 2, and we hadn't wounded their leader. They had ours. So we ended up losing.
It was very close.
Yeah. And if Elrond hadn't died and had gone and taken the 3rd objective like I wanted us to, we might have won. You'll see there's a common theme in these games where we probably could have won if we'd played better.
Well,
actually, it wasn't always OT's fault. I will say that.
I think there were there were some matchups that were unwinnable. Like I don't think we could have won the Bears. I think the Bears was like how
spoilers. We'll come to that. But there you go. So game 1,
maybe we drew.
It was very close. I think wasn't it like 5-4 or something?
5-6. And they passed their courage test because we tied up the Dragon Emperor with the Easterling on the rear objective. And if they'd failed that, we'd have won.
We broke them, so there was like a fairly good chance that they'd run, which made the Elrond thing like less bad. But then they passed every single courage test. They didn't fail a single courage test. It was like, oh, come on, they're not that good at courage.
And how did the Dragon Emperor feel?
He's very, very good, but I think with certain like pieces of terrain, the base does become more of a hindrance than a help. And like he did just get stuck behind their lines, and so he didn't really do anything all game. Like he ended on full wounds, full fate, most of his might. Like
you just ignored him basically.
The 80 mil base balances him, because if you're going to have a phalanx, he has. If you want him to sit behind it, he then is stuck. He can't get through. He's not like on a horse where you can fling him around the wing. He's just stuck there because he's so slow. So I think he's fine.
I think if you can get him into the center of the board, though, I think he becomes like, it just means like you have banners in every fight, and that's very powerful. And actually, the other thing was with the fight 5 black dragons against elves, that was actually quite relevant because it means you're suddenly drawing those fights rather than winning them on fight. But like,
equally, we should have just withdrew the Riv Knights and shot them.
Yeah.
In reality, because that's how we should have played it.
And he was less OP than I thought he was, but I still think he's slightly too powerful for his
as soon as we knocked those cav models off their horse, we should have just run away.
Yeah. But then I don't know. I will touch on like how you should play later.
Riv Knights, if you play them properly, are boring.
Yes, that's the thing, and I think I have picked the wrong army.
Oh dear.
They're fun strategically, and actually they're really fun with the Fellowship because it was kind of like, how do you use the hobbits and all the might effectively? And so in 2 of our games it was really fun, and then in the others it was boring, and it was just we just sat there and
shot.
You shot some bows and nothing happened.
Well, luckily, when OT and I do our doubles, hopefully there'll be less decision making and more just running into combat and killing stuff / dying,
which I think is OT's favoured tactic.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a dwarf purist. I think it's where my heart lies.
So should we move on to the next game?
Please do.
So this one's Assassination. It's basically pick an enemy hero that's not the leader and pick a friendly hero that's not the leader. They're your target and your assassin respectively. And if you wound their guy, you get points. If you kill them, you get more points. And if you kill them with your assassin, you get even more points. I think there are also points for breaking. Is there points for banner? I think there might be banner as well. Or it might be leader. So, our opponents were using some Gondor Shizzle, Boromir, Madril, Hurin, Ingold, loads of dudes, people with bows, some cav. Just a really good mix of really solid troops and really solid heroes. So naturally, we picked Hurin for some reason because he's probably going to yeet into combat. Boromir we couldn't pick because he was leader. Madril is weak, but we imagined he was going to stick on the flank somewhere. And obviously Ingold is fucking basically impossible to kill because he's got defense. So they were pretty sure that we hadn't picked Ingold, and they didn't fall for our yeet a goblin at Ingold and hope they think we've picked the Ingold strategy. As you can see from the setup, they're prepared to do a few turns of shooting, and we're prepared to just run at them. We didn't really feel like we could do much else. I mean, we couldn't really sit back. We wanted to get in there and start pinning them down, seeing if we could get some flanks. But they played it really well. They moved their left flank, as we're looking at it here, moved that back in a way that basically meant a load of our goblins couldn't get to the fight for a little bit. There was a really interesting spot prize for this round that both ourselves and OT and Onod were going for, and that's to kill 3 of your own models. So the fastest team to kill 3 of their own models. So first turn, Goblin King wasn't in range to throw any goblins. Second and third turn, he lobbed a goblin. Fourth turn, we got into combat, so we ran a goblin into combat first, then ran the king on top of that goblin, auto-killed that goblin, king's in combat. So we got some dice from that, so that was nice. That was the main thing we got from this game. So, yeah, as the game went on, I mean, we were trying to stay out of range of some of their cav, and most of our army had only kind of semi-committed during the game. On the next slide, on 3 and 4, you can see they did manage to start thinning us down. We got like quite a nice surround on the right hand side, you can see. But I mean, our numbers are massively dwindling, and we broke pretty fast. I made a massive error with one of the mercenary captains who got combated into. So we were a little bit worried that maybe they just got their assassination. Huron at this point was at the back for some reason. Excuse me. So the other mercenary captain, we thought, well, maybe they're going for that mercenary captain. And Boromir just yeeted himself towards that mercenary captain, and so we were pretty convinced that it was probably actually him.
In the last 2 turns, they just went, "Yeah, we're gonna come back. Oh yeah, I'm gonna spend 2 points of might to win this fight. Okay, and now I've spent another one to kill another goblin." And it's like, okay.
Yeah, they're trying really hard to get Boromir to get over there. So we naturally ran that captain away. I think all of our captains passed all their courage, didn't they? Oh no, Gollum rolled Snake Eyes. That's right. Gollum rolled Snake Eyes and ran away, which I'm pretty sure he also didn't in game 1. So that was a bit shit, especially as he was pretty much the only way of us getting through their lines. However, so at this point, we're pretty sure we're losing because we're broken and we haven't managed to scratch any points off of them. But then in the last slide, miraculously, the Goblin Scribe brought on 6 or 7 goblins from behind, and we completely surrounded Huron. We managed to get a couple of goblins into him, and the rest surrounded him and supported. Naturally, we lost that fight, of course.
Nice.
So, how have we dismounted Huron?
So we dismounted Huron because we, I'm pretty sure we
Probably
threw someone, didn't we?
I think we threw a goblin at him. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we did a hurl at some point earlier.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, so we had all these goblins on him for 2 rounds, and we didn't do anything. And then the Goblin King, our last ditch effort was because we were now broken and we hadn't scored any points. We knew we were losing, and our only chance was to get at least a wound on Huron, which I think would have drawn us the game. We lost the combat, but the king combated up to some random Gondor guy who we were then going to hurl into the combat with Huron. And we did hurl him. No, we lost the combat, didn't we, at the end? We didn't get to hurl the goblin, did we?
So what happened was Huron lost the combat against all of the goblins.
Yeah.
We rolled a wound, and then we only did 1 wound. They saved it with fate, even though Huron had 2 might points left.
That's right, yeah.
The Goblin King then had to win his fight to then hurl.
That's right.
A Gondorian into Huron in the last ditch effort to actually do the final wound.
And he whiffed.
And then he whiffed and lost this fight anyway.
Classic me rolling. So yeah, that was unfortunate. So it was a close-ish 3-1 loss. We could have won it. It was always a hard battle. Like when your opponent just has a lot of solid troops, I feel like that's just really good against Goblin Town, especially as they manipulated kind of where the fight was taking place really well.
The terrain did not help us a lot.
No, it did not. So yeah, it was looking bad for us. We did the best we could. So that was our first loss. Over to you guys and your second game.
Yes. So this was, I think, the game that was equally the most fun and the most frustrating.
What are you playing against?
So we played against Elves. It was a Rivendell Lothlorien alliance. It was almost entirely infantry. The only cav they had was it 3 Galadrim knights and Glorfindel on horse. Before we started, I was sort of saying we should pick Glorfindel as the assassin, and then we talked ourselves out of it, and I regret that decision.
Yeah, but our logic was sound. It was just like
stuck with our guns, I think.
I mean,
what did you pick?
Basically, we thought either it's Glorfindel or Círdan. Glorfindel's going to be in combat, but it's Glorfindel, so he's really hard to kill. Or we go for Círdan, who's super squishy, but is going to be harder to get to. And in the end, my logic, although I suppose our joint logic, was that kind of the best bet with this army is to hope to kind of table people by just kiting the entire time and making it a really miserable experience for everybody. So
brilliant.
That's pretty much what we did. That's pretty much what we did for 2.5 hours. What you can see in pictures 1 and 2 is kind of deployment. So they deployed on the far side of the board as we're looking. They grouped together in a big shield wall, and then they made the interesting decision to not channel Blinding Light with Galadriel. They opted to just keep recasting it every turn.
What?
Using her free point of will.
Why wouldn't you channel it?
Because they were afraid they would use the might point and then roll double ones, and we were like,
just use 2 will.
Yeah,
or might it if you're even gonna like.
Yeah. Anyway, that was their decision, and it did come back to bite them later, as we'll see. But then we deployed, kind of tucked in this house, and we were like, okay, we just want to pick our fights if we can. The plan was, and this is after game 1, we had a slight change in strategy from just hide all the hobbits at the back to hide Merry and Pippin at the back, and then bring Frodo and Sam with us to try and get some nice heroic combats and ring action off.
Speaking of the hobbits, we heard from the TO who came over to us. He said, now I know you guys are going for the spot prize with your goblins, but there's some people over there bringing hobbits up a building to then throw them off. And we were thinking, that can't be OT and Onod. They wouldn't be that foolish.
And also, nobody else brought hobbits, so spoiler, it was us.
It was you. So what happened with that?
It wasn't just because we wanted to throw them off. There was a secondary purpose, which was if they had picked a hobbit, we would just then hide them at the top of the building.
Sure.
So we didn't commit 3 hobbits, we only committed 2, and we were like, okay, so if things go really badly this game, we will then chuck them off if it meant getting some.
But you need to kill 3 of your own models.
Because we were like, if it goes badly, we'll just do something with Sam later on. But we wanted to use Sam's might before we then killed him.
That makes sense. Okay.
Unfortunately, the only hobbit who slipped and fell whilst climbing the building was Pippin, who happens to then be the person that they had picked.
He not only fell once, he actually fell twice.
Yeah.
He passed his fate roll, did he?
Yeah, but then the next time he fell from such a height that there was no way we could save him, and he just died.
Well, he didn't have any fate left, so
yeah. But yeah, that aside, the game went really, really well.
Other than that, we basically played the best game of SBG that we've ever done. We managed to bait them into splitting their force into 2. We then We then heroic marched everyone over with Aragorn to then surround and completely destroy one force, including their leader Galadriel.
Excellently
and
done.
then in the last turn of the game before the time ran out, we were able to get a charge into the Rivendell force that had run all the way over to come and support, which we then wounded Glorfindel in because Frodo and Aragorn heroic combated into him together, and we took out their front line of elves. So we basically were going to table them if we had got any further turns, and we lost one Riv Knight during all of that.
Jesus.
So
you won the game, right?
Yeah, we drew the game because they had as many points as us because they had 5 from Pippin falling off. And
Right.
the thing I'm more frustrated about in this game is we should have picked Glorfindel as a target, and I should have stuck to my gut, which was pick Glorfindel. But then we talked ourselves out of it because we were like, oh, but we might get a shot at Círdan or whatever. But obviously with Blinding Light, that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
We did
they,
actually
as they
kill
say,
a
they
Wood Elf
refused to channel it.
Sentinel.
Yeah.
Well, that was only with Galadriel, though. The guy
Yeah.
playing Círdan did channel it, so
using
And
the
what are these 3/6s?
I think that was Aragorn wounding Glorfindel at the end.
Oh, nice.
Aragorn alternated between being like
He
literal god in human form to absolute trash, and like
one of the
just
two.
like
Did it have anything to do with your rolling by any chance?
My rolling was very swingy.
Yeah.
He is very good on horse though.
Yeah,
horse
is worth it.
If you aren't taking Anduril, you need a horse on Aragorn. Otherwise, he's just a very expensive free knight.
Because he's only strength 4, so like
yeah.
He needs the extra attacks or Anduril.
But like
fight 6 is an Eve.
The might machine is disgusting. Like every game that we kept him alive into the late game in, it's ridiculous. Like
the payback is good.
We were calling heroics that like people were like, I don't think I've ever played. Like we were calling heroics
accuracy.
We were calling heroic accuracy.
Just because you can,
we were just like, we haven't spent his might point, and the Riv Knights have stood still. We might as well do an accuracy so that we get to try and hit people in their second line. Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
We're calling heroic accuracy. Like you just get so much free shit with that. But I think he needs to back up his sort of that with being good in combat as well, which he did in half of games.
But yeah, like I'm gutted we didn't win this game because like I think this is the only game I could say for certainty we deserve to win. I think even
it was the only one where I think we genuinely outplayed the opponents.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just dice rolling. Yeah.
Nice. Well, it's unfortunate you got the loss. I feel like you can still be the draw. You can still be happy that
I mean we were happy with the draw.
You played it really well.
Our opponents were nice. Like it was one of the few games where we were kind of like we're actually kind of having fun, even though we because it was like a normal list. It was like we're not playing some legendary legion that gives someone a 5-up save. And then we get to fate point.
Good reason.
So
yeah. This was the last game I was able to stay at the table through the entire game. The other ones I had to walk away for a quick breather before coming back.
And like the viewers are probably going to say you shouldn't go to a GBHL 100 event with a fluffy list, but it's kind of like it wasn't that we were like gutted that we were like not doing well. It was like it was so competitive that it just kind of was like sucking some of the
life out of you.
So there were what 4 or 5 bear lists there, and like 5, and there were 4 Dragon Emperor legions. Like,
I didn't see any assault on Lothlorien though.
No, there was no assault on Lothlorien.
No,
I'm
which was
assuming
interesting
because it was a doubles, and
there were a few Numenor and Rivendell though.
Yeah,
like people have started taking that like quite a lot.
Good.
Yeah, well, we will get onto that with Isildur. Isildur really fucked us, but we'll get onto that later.
That was mostly our own fault.
Wow.
Let's go on to our game 3 then. So on this one, we're playing bears. So the scenario is whole ground.
Prize.
Is whole ground, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's.
It was the
corner ones.
The double scenario, which requires one force to go into opposite corners and the other force into opposite corners, and the objective is to have more models in the central objective than your opponent, which is pretty good for us.
So again, we're playing an objective scenario against bears. A bit closer, this one, I think. I feel like the more the game went on, the worse it got. But essentially, we just decided to blitz it towards the middle. It became 2 one-on-one battles, really. With
it's just like each bear fought against one side of the army. And you can see that in picture 2, that's pretty much between the two buildings. That's where the objective is. So each bear was trying to get inside that central section, and we were just trying to force the issue by having as many models in the middle as possible. So even if we conceded VPs by losing our leader and breaking, as long as we had more models in the middle, we'd still win.
Yeah, and because there's a couple of tasty buildings in the middle, and we've got mercenaries, we've got guaranteed models in there. So, I mean, we basically just wanted to flood the middle. It ends on a 1 or a 2 rather than 25, so we can't just die quickly. We needed to try and kill them, because if they broke us too quickly, we'd have to go through loads of courage tests if the game kept going on. I don't feel like I did too well on my side. There was a lot of whiffing. Scribe brought some flanking models on, which was quite nice, and our mercenaries deployed in the 2 buildings in the middle there. One set of mercenaries literally just sat in the left-hand building the whole game, because every model in there was within 6 of the objective, so they didn't need to move. Image number 3 and 4. So 3 is just, you can see the mercenaries in that building up there, and Sebastian's kind of fighting this side. I kept looking over, and you kept getting a really nice surrounds. We ended up definitely breaking the bears. On my side, I think it ended up being Grim Beorn and 2 Beornings, and on Sebastian's side, I think it was just Beorn left, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I managed to kill all of the Beornings except for 1 or 2. I think the archers that kind of went into the middle, but all of the Beornings just got trapped every turn. I think on average I killed maybe 2 or 3 a turn. Because they just weren't. I mean, in our first game it was very different because they were rolling all the 6s, but this time they were rolling 5 high, and I was able to get enough goblins in to consistently get the 6, and because of the traps, it was just really, really consistent killing.
Yeah. And on the right-hand image there, you can see my rolls for Blubbery Mass against Beorn. Out of the 8 dice, I failed 5 of them. And even though I could might these, I didn't have any might. So, I could have saved him. I think maybe he had 1 fate at this point, if any. So I just completely whiffed on that, and he died. And then in the last slide, image 5, you can see what's left. 2 Beornings on the left there, the 2 bears. There's still 10 mercenaries in that building on the left. And then we've got all of our goblins elsewhere. I think the game ended on a 2. The round was slowly coming to an end, and it was our opponent's priority. It got to the point, I think we got through maybe even 4 turns.
I believe that it went through 3, and I think it ended on the 4th.
Okay, so we played through 4 turns, did we? No, 3 turns where we were broken. No, 4. Yeah, because it's the end of a turn in which you're broken.
Three lots of courage tests. We did 3 courage tests, I think, overall, and then the last bit, the game ended. So I think maybe it was 3 turns.
Okay, so 3 turns. And we did manage to, because they didn't have any might at this point, we did manage to do a couple of cheeky moves so that they couldn't just tie up our heroes and watch everyone else run away. We did have to play it quite strategically at the end, make sure everyone had like line of sight to a model that had just done their courage test and had a stand fast. I think maybe like Grinner or something ran near the end, but pretty much everyone else stuck around, and the most important one, the mercenary captain in the building, stuck around the whole time. So, I mean, unless they got into the building, we were basically always going to win. We're both broken. They killed our leader, but we had the objective. So that was an 8-3 win for us. So, yeah, happy with that. 2 wins against Bears. So 2 wins and a loss so far. So should we do your game 3?
Game 3. Wow. Wow.
One for the ages.
This was a weird game.
Yeah.
It was definitely a game. So it was Azog's Legion. Well, no, it wasn't the Legendary Legion, sorry. It was just Azog's like regular Legion with Necromancer allies.
Necromancer allies. What did they have? Just the Necromancer, or?
And
a
like
bunch of the Morannon Orky dudes, whatever they're called. Gundabad Orcs, maybe. Smattering of Hunter Orcs. No bows, which I thought was quite interesting.
One spider.
One spider who did fuck all. And yeah, that was kind of it. I mean, they spent almost 500 points on heroes.
Yeah, our opponents in this game were way more experienced than us, and I think it's fair to say we're pretty confident at the beginning. To the point
for good reason.
To the point of like overconfidence, where they were just kind of like, I'm not going to say like not paying attention, but like I think that they were just kind of being a little bit like blasé about like what they were doing. So they basically
because they'd kind of given up to the idea of losing, or because they were like, "No, we've got this."
They'd had a shit.
They were going to smash us.
They'd had a shit tournament up till now, and I think they were thinking we are now down kind of with the lower
shit players,
tables, and we shouldn't have too much issue dealing with this, because it was quite clear that their plan was to go sit in the middle, use the Necromancer's magic and Azog's Fight 7, because they had this combo where they cast the Shroud, is it, or something?
Shroud of Shadows, yeah.
Shroud of Shadows and Azog, which means that he then essentially counts as having like the ring because it halves the fight value. And what can we do against that? Because we couldn't even strike up. And it's like,
it's basically a really expensive version of Gollum and the King.
Yeah, or a slightly more expensive version of what we were doing, which was Frodo and Aragorn.
Yeah.
So I think their plan was fine. We were a bit kind of sitting there thinking, why aren't you using Chill Soul and just killing
dudes? Yeah,
like just kill dudes rather than trying to get this combo off. It was almost like they had like designed this combo and they wanted to make it work. And I got the sense that maybe this was more of a like road test for them of like a list idea rather than like they were necessarily thinking exactly about how to win specifically. So they run everyone in. They use a lot of Azog's might to.
They marched 3 times in a row with Azog's might. Yeah. Literally just yeeted into the center.
They run everyone into the middle, and we were like, yeah, we were kind of expecting them to do that. We were keeping well out of charge range because we were like, they will just kill our forces, and we're on opposite corners, so there isn't really a good way of us getting to each other. We were just like, okay, what do we do here? We sit and we shoot them a bit, I guess. Yep. They then suddenly, kind of out of nowhere, he had one Warbat and one Azog. Now, I had positioned my hobbits in such a way that whilst the Warbat had range to technically fly over, he couldn't land. There was not enough room for his base.
Yeah.
So he was kind of like, he moved his Warbat around and he managed to dismount Arwen because she was the only model that he could physically get to, because I had positioned it so that Aragorn was okay. And then he moves Azog up. And what he ended up doing was he ended up charging Azog into Bill
the pony,
and the Warbat into Aragorn. And I was kind of like, that is not what I would have done. I would have charged Azog into Aragorn and the Warbat into Bill.
Is Aragorn buffed? Is Azog buffed with the shadow thing?
He is not buffed with the shadow thing.
Okay.
The ensuing combat phase, and bearing in mind, Azog has at this point used 3 might. He might have even used 4 at this point, but he's definitely used 3. And he obviously has the white wargs, but he's used a lot of might on March. He calls a heroic combat.
Off of Bill, of course.
Off of Bill. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I countered it, but I countered it with Sam because I was like, Sam
which combat is Sam in?
Sam is in the same combat as Aragorn against Warlock because there's only 2 of he's only brought 2 of his models to my Fellowship force. He's left all of the others in the middle. So I was like, I will counter this with Sam. And then they were like, do you want to call any other heroics? And I was like, yes, I will strike with Aragorn.
Yeah. We can see where this is going. And were they like, oh shit?
And I think there was a bit of a realization from him because at the end of the game, he went, that was actually quite nice. And I think this was probably the only thing we did this game that was
maybe they just weren't expecting you to see that.
I think this might have been the only thing this game where we really did something that was clever rather than just dice rolling. Now, obviously, we got a bit of luck because we won the combat. So
with Aragorn. So the roll off went your way. Aragorn went first.
The roll off went our way. I rolled to strike with Aragorn. I rolled a 1. I was like, fucking brilliant. We kill the Warbats. Aragorn and Sam use their charge to trap Azog.
Because they're fearless, right?
Because they're fearless. Yeah. Which is another.
See, it all makes sense.
And the fearless was huge in this game actually for us. When we came to deal with the Necromancer. We both roll 6s. I think he actually used his last might point to bump up to a 6, did he?
Yeah.
He was out of might after this combat. We won another roll off. So as you can see, the dice were definitely on our side this game.
It happens, but also you did roll a 1 for your
for the strike. So it shouldn't even been a thing.
It balanced out.
That is true. Fair. We win the roll off. We wound him. He's down to 1 wound. I had left Bill till last
because of course not.
Because I was like, I want Bill to kill him. Bill then succeeds in wounding on a 6 by a 5.
Wow.
Or was it 6 by 4, 6 by 5? I can't remember what it was, but it was ridiculous.
He has 3 fate left because he left them. He rolls the first one, fails, rolls the second one, passes. So at this point, Azog is left with 1 wound and 1 fate. The next turn, he's so far away. All they could do next turn to help Azog, because we've now killed their only model with high move, and the spiders fighting the elves. The only thing he could do was shroud Azog. But then I just charged him with Frodo and popped the ring on.
Brilliant. So now Azog's halved and you're halved.
We were both halved. And I think Aragorn striked. So Aragorn went up and then just ended up being higher when you halve it.
So he was on 5.
So we then killed Azog, and then Sam killed the White Warg. So it was a fun moment, and our opponents took it pretty well. And I think that this was probably the moment where I think they realized they were became a bit more fatalistic rather than confident, and were like, oh fuck, here we go again.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, they did charge 1 hero into your whole army, basically.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think if he had charged Aragorn and
probably would have
caused a strike v strike, he wouldn't have died, and he probably then would have had a good chance in the future terms of taking the rest of the Fellowship. Because he could have had the Warbat killing a couple of hobbits whilst Azog was fighting Aragorn, but he did the other way around. But there you go. So after this, they were like, right, okay, we will charge out a load of orcs, we will try and break ourselves, and we will end the game with us on the middle objective.
Hoping to roll a 1 or a 2.
Hoping to roll a 1 or 2. So they started stabbing with hunter orcs so that they could kill themselves.
Yeah.
They like ran out about 8 dudes to the Fellowship, which Aragorn and Sam and Frodo obviously just like cut down as they came in. We did lose Arwen. Arwen did die.
I think that was the saddest I've ever seen you.
She lost.
I think
well,
the moment Arwen died, I watched your soul got crushed.
This was before Azog charged in like recklessly, and the Warbat I think had killed Arwen. Was it? I think so. And I was just like, we are going to get smashed in this game. Like, we're not going to be able to get any rafts off, so we can't really deal with these orcs because we won't be able to get enough charge bone. So at that point, but it picked up then. Yeah, it was weird because they were like stabbing themselves. They finally broke themselves, and we just didn't roll a 1.
Yeah. Like, how did you deal with the necromancer then?
Yeah, but we must have played for like an hour when they were broken.
Yeah.
And like just never rolled a 1 or a 2.
Well, and like on the left-hand side of the board, like my knights just cleaned up pretty much the entirety of the orcs. Elrond killed about 8 or 9 orcs by himself.
Yeah.
I just chained together some heroic combats, and then like they just didn't have enough dudes left. Like and the necromancer's great until you're on top of him, and like he's then only got 1 attack, and unless he's fight 7, but it's not that scary.
And importantly, as the infantry keyword.
Yeah.
So you can knock him down.
We could knock him down. So what we ended up doing was Aragorn, unfortunately, does end up dying. So at first, Elrond was still dealing with some orcs. I got in first. Aragorn charges in.
You can see
rolls,
the roll.
He
Page
rolls 4 1s. And obviously, I didn't have enough might. Like he'd used his 3 might point to strike, I think, or something like. I can't remember exactly how it worked out. But I was like, oh. And then, of course, the necromancer has the rule where you do 1 like wound and you're dead. And I failed my fate roll, and it was like, oh.
And of course, we'd come over when you rolled this.
Yes, you and Sebastian. Every time you came over, the dice were against us.
Yeah.
So we sent you away after that.
Yeah.
What then later happened though was Frodo, because he'd run out of might at this point, was kind of yo-yoing between walking towards the middle and then losing,
running away,
wandering, and being.
You can take the ring off.
I realized you could do that, but I didn't want him to be targeted by magic because then I'd lose Fearless. But what we did have was Fearless Hobbits. So Sam, Merry, and Pippin proved to be, along with Elrond, the only models brave enough to charge Necromancer. So they were helping Elrond to trap him, and then Elrond was doing the damage. And actually, to be fair, the Hobbits, because they were higher fight, were helping us win the fight because he only had 1 dice. And we just eventually, after I think 3 turns, were able to get rid of all of his will points from Fate. And there was some bad rolling. Like he did not roll well for his will fate points, but we eventually took him down, and we tabled them somehow. God knows how.
Very nice. It's got a win.
Yeah,
12-0
win.
It was a very satisfying win. Like we didn't play super well, but it was quite a nice win to have.
We played well enough, but it was mainly dice, I think, and opponents kind of making interesting decisions that we didn't fully understand, but I'm sure they had a game plan. And to be fair, if they'd rolled a 1 or a 2, they would have got like a narrow. They'd have got a narrow win earlier on. So it's a bit kind of like they played it quite high stakes, and it just didn't pan out for them.
I've played a few games with Riv Knights now. I've never had a game like that where my opponent deliberately just stands in range and just lets you shoot them for turn after turn after turn. And I was just like, I've got the army bonus. I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep picking. So I killed loads of hunters because I was targeting the hunter orcs because they're lower defense and it was easier.
And
they were just losing so many guys, and
they didn't really try to close with us.
No, they just sat there and
tried to control any space, because we were kind of worried that they were going to like isolate one of our forces and like knock us out. Because obviously, like if they attack the Fellowship on their own, there's like not much we're going to do against that. and the River Knights aren't going to be strong enough to really do anything other than just kind of sit there and shoot. But they just decided to sit in the middle, and I guess they were hoping that they broken the dice roll 1 or 2. And to be fair, you would expect 1 or 2 to come up after three turns. But...
So your opponents ended the tournament 1 place below you.
They did, yes. Yep. They won their last game of the tournament, I believe.
To be fair, so they were like really they were clearly good players. Like even stuff like the way they were measuring and moving stuff, like they were clearly just really well practiced. I think they just weren't taking us that seriously, which was understandable. Like
they were much better at like if they said something moves 6 inches, it actually moves 6 inches. Let's put it that way. And not everyone at the tournament you could say that for would be my comment on that.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Well, so should we go to our game 4 then? So this mission was another objective mission.
It's weird how your goblin list did really well when loads of objective missions came up.
Yeah, interesting.
What probably mission? Unrelated.
Probably. I forget what this objective mission actually was. But
isn't it the 5 dotted around the board?
Yeah, but is it the singles scenario?
Yeah. Single control.
So we.
Oh yeah, so you can go onto an objective and then leave it, which is perfect for us because we don't want to have goblins passing courage to take objectives. So you deploy in the middle of the board. Sebastian, do you want to go through this one?
Yeah, I can talk through this one. So our opponents were using a Khazad-dûm and Lothlorien alliance.
Which is pretty cool.
It's pretty gamey because they want to have that high defense at the front and fight 6 in the back, fight 5, and they also had
even though they're deployed completely away from each other.
Yeah, I think the issue is we just had so many models.
Yeah, they couldn't just deploy in the middle because we surround them.
Yeah, so they couldn't really use the tactic that they wanted to use, which was hot gates and just hope that they never lose a fight, because the scenario just meant that we've got to go around the board and start capturing.
And you'll notice, listener, that we picked the side of the board with the big terrain piece on, which meant they couldn't hide in there. Smart. It was a very open board.
To be fair, we didn't have to swap sides. It was just we happened to be there and it happened to be useful.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they had Celeborn, a King's Champion. They also had
a king. They had an actual king. Yeah.
And the Dwarf King was their leader.
He's fight 6.
Yep.
Yeah, he's fight 6. Yeah, they're
pretty tasty.
So we deployed in one long line, as you can see in picture 1, with the king staying as far away from Celeborn as possible because of the difficulty with Bugbear Ras and also the spells they can cast on him. Our opponents also had 4 sentinels, so that was quite scary. They spent quite a lot of time trying to make us take courage tests to move us out of the way. We did have to spend quite a lot of will early on.
They did catch us out a couple times near the beginning, didn't they? I'd completely forgotten about sentinels, to be honest. So they made a couple of our captains run away a little bit. And I think Gollum ran away a little bit as well.
Gollum ended up moving somewhere else, so we ended up having to trap him. The Goblin King had to spend his will on the first turn because otherwise he'd be going 6 inches in the opposite direction.
Yeah. We couldn't afford the Goblin King to be out for 2 turns.
Yeah, and because we got to deploy first, we also got to deploy right on the line, so it meant that all of our goblins were just sat on 3 of the objectives at the front. They deployed the King's Champion in the middle. We just sort of deployed some captains and chaff in front of him, and Celeborn's on the right hand side.
So our plan was to ignore Celeborn, basically. Let him kill goblins.
Yeah, if we just bog him down, there's not enough time in the day for him to make his points back. So we just went, yeah, we'll just bubble wrap Celeborn. We don't even have to charge him. He can charge us whoever he wants. It was a very slow and steady kind of entrapment. I think in the first turn though, I ended up killing 4 Khazad Guard.
Yeah, the first turn that you did was brutal. Your rolling was hot this tournament.
It was really, really bizarre. I don't think I've ever rolled this well at an event, and I think that kind of shows when we say how with the results later. But But yeah, so the game, we spent the first few turns just slogging it out and killing a few models here and there. We'd lose a fair few goblins. But
I was getting thin on the ground on my side.
I thought we would die a lot quicker, to be fair, but it was. There were a few fights where we would trap and they would end up winning because they'd roll a 6, and then we would win a couple of fights where we're not trapping them and then not kill. So it was a bit kind of, if it was the other way around, which is the way it probably should have been, where we've got more models, we should win that fight instead, then we would have probably been able to get through a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But as you can see in picture 2, the goblin mercenaries arrived in the 2
exactly when we wanted them. Straight away, turn 2, they came in.
It was pretty brutal because we were literally by turn 2 we had already had the 3 central objectives, and one of our goblins was running to our own objective at the back, who captured it the turn after. The mercenaries turned up right where one of the other objectives was because it was inside the building.
Yeah,
so
in the back middle.
Tested, and by the end of that turn, we had all 5 objectives. So it was just a case of killing and ending the game as fast as possible.
Yeah. So in the next slide, you can see our entrapment slowly but surely making its way. We were just ignoring the King's Champion at this point. He wasn't even winning that many fights, was he? We just couldn't really kill him. So we just wanted the Goblin King to mop up some troops, didn't we?
Yeah, we were just charging the King's Champ with 1 goblin and supporting, so we might win the fight, but also if he wins, then he's only killing 1 goblin every turn.
Yeah.
Which is
and he couldn't. We were making it so that even if he combated, he'd combat into one of the goblins, so they were just like not doing anything with it. And we had enough might to do move offs pretty much wherever we wanted. Kellerborn in the bottom right there, you can see him just. I mean, I basically just surrounded him, and I was just letting him do what he wanted, and I was just trying to kill everything else. I mean,
pretty quickly. You can see the king was making his way around the back of their lines just throughout combating. It was also a game where we were rolling very well and they were rolling very poorly, so it just ended up going very, very quickly in our favor.
The one cav on the right hand side there, I think survived like maybe the longest, even though I surrounded him and outnumbered him pretty much every turn. He'd pretty much always beat me in combat.
There was a moment, wasn't there, where the heralds, my 2 goblins beat his heralds in a 2-on-1 fight, and Mayor just said, "Oh, go on then, just roll double 6."
Which is what you needed.
And it just killed the herald with just 2 regular goblins, and then the other herald died to the Goblin King. So it was just very brutal in one turn.
It felt good because you were rolling so hard. I was just like, just roll 2 6s. It's easy for you, easy, and you did. So, yeah. I mean, it was just a slow, methodical win, wasn't it? In the last couple turns, we got Gollum with the ring in with the king on their King's Champion just to mop it up, and that was it. 11-1. Because I think, did they get a wound on the Goblin King, or I can't remember. Maybe they broke us. I don't know.
You were broken in this one. I think we came over and you were doing.
Yeah, we broke at the very end.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we probably didn't even play a full turn where we were broken. So yeah, that was that game. I mean, our opponents were really good. We voted for them for best sporting.
They did because sports, didn't they?
Yeah, they won best sport. So, your game 4 then.
This was shit.
I think it's fair to say this was our least favorite game, and
I beg to. The last game really crushed my spirit.
The last game was boring.
Oh, okay, interesting.
This game was like frustrating.
Yeah,
and you're playing bears, I see.
Question: what kind of bear is best?
That's a ridiculous question.
False. Black bear.
Playing bears. Deployment didn't really favor us too well. We were kind of split on should we split our forces so that the bears couldn't try and surround the Rift Knights. But then obviously one half of our force probably isn't going to be able to deal with half of the bears. We kind of felt like we needed to be together.
Yeah.
But then by deploying together, we basically enabled them to surround us and prevent us from escaping from the sort of corner that we ended up backing into.
Sure.
We got a couple of rounds of shooting off. We actually killed a couple of the Beornings, but it wasn't really enough before the bears got in, just because they were so kind of like quick. We were kind of like, we could probably take a bear.
Yeah, you could probably burst down a bear.
We were like, we can burst down a bear and we can use the ring.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be able to survive with the rest of our army to realistically do anything. And they obviously had Beorn as the leader, and Grim Beorn as the whatever the other one is, second, whatever it is called. That's Barrows and Badgers, isn't that? The secondary forces leader.
Yeah.
They obviously were more reckless with Grim Beorn, which makes sense. So we were like, let's take our chance. Let's see how we go. We couldn't burst him down because of the bear saves.
Oh right, was he just lucky with them, or
we had him fully surrounded with Aragorn and
we did our classic little heroic combat shenanigans with hobbits and Frodo's ring, had him trapped, hit him with Aragorn, won the fight, dealt a load of wounds. I think we took out all of his fate, did we?
Yeah.
But he just had too much in the way of saves, so we couldn't take him down. And we, at this point, Beorn was about to hit us, and we were like how do we do anything now? So what we ended up doing was Frodo still had some might, so I was like, Frodo's going to cockblock the bear for 2 turns by calling heroic defense. With his fate points.
Prime Mourinho just fully parking the bus.
Exactly. And we're just going to run away with our remaining models. Bill, unfortunately, didn't make it out. He got stuck in combat. But we managed to escape with Aragorn and Elrond, the last remaining models, because at this point, the bears had just cleaned up all of the Rib Knights.
Brilliant.
It's fucking disgusting.
Not that unsurprising, though, to be honest.
It's not, and I think that was what made it for me so frustrating. It was like
you couldn't do it.
The bears on themselves were manageable, but not with all the Beornings, because 2 attack models at fight 5,
and they're all banners. They're all bannered by the bears,
and they all have banners. Our elves, which we are paying
big money for,
more money for than a Beorning, for all of their perks, and they can't deal with them because our shooting is nerfed because they're 2 wounds. So even though they're low defense, we're realistically essentially having to kill 2 models to get rid of 1. Two ordinary models. And in combat, even if we get the charge bonus off, actually, because of the banner reroll, most of their models are better off than ours because our banner only has a normal range. And on top of that, you've got 2 massive bears running around where it's
just tearing shit up.
Aragorn and Elrond.
Doing whatever they want.
Yeah, Aragorn and Elrond can deal with these, but not if they have a 5-up save, and not if we aren't using all of our might to deal with them, at which point you then don't have the might to do everything else you need. So it was a bit like I couldn't physically see a way that we could win. And so it was a bit like, it was kind of like, I know you get bad matchups.
You're just playing the motions, aren't you?
It didn't feel like there was a feasible way for this list to beat the other list in this mission, and it didn't feel like it was because of the way the list was played. It felt like it was just rules.
The other fucking crushing thing was they all have woodland creature, and this map was full of fucking woods.
Forests.
So literally, we were like elves, and we were running from the trees, and it was just what are we doing here? And the other thing, they fucking outnumbered us. They outnumbered us, and it was like, at this point, we are so screwed. Like, like, what are we actually supposed to do?
So it did feel a little bit like the previous day's luck kind of came around. There was a bit of kind of like...
Ooh, some shenanigans. Ooh, spicy.
It was the sort of game where you had to pay attention quite carefully to what your opponent was doing and challenge some stuff. You couldn't...
Very diplomatically put. Well done.
You couldn't just let it go.
What were they doing?
Schrodinger's bear.
There was an instance where Bjorn... The tables were pop-up tables.
Oh, yeah. They were annoying, actually.
Our opponent claimed that he had positioned Bjorn in such a way that a Riv Knight couldn't charge him. And I was like, I don't mind this. He hadn't measured this. He hadn't pre-measured this. So I was kind of thinking to myself, well, you haven't pre-measured that. So I'm not 100% convinced that's true. He had pre-measured to make sure Frodo couldn't charge him. I had watched that. He hadn't pre-measured this Riv Knight. So he claimed he'd pre-measured this. And I was kind of thinking, I didn't see you pre-measure that night. I would have been willing to go with him like, okay, that was the intent, and I accept that the tables were a little bit shaky, so the bear might have ended up moving the requisite centimetre that would then allow the knight to charge. However, a minute before he said this, he had been using the bear to try and claim that Arwen couldn't charge because of the bear's control zone. And I kind of went to him, I was like, well, you just said that Arwen couldn't move because of the control zone. So I kind of feel like if you wanted to make that argument, and he kind of was like, oh, fair play, buddy.
Onod doesn't like that. Or...
Onod doesn't like being called buddy, just for context.
Well, he actually said buddy.
He said buddy.
He called
a couple of times, and I just watched Onod's blood pressure rise.
Every sentence ended with buddy. And of course, you're not going to know that someone finds that annoying, but I do find that quite annoying. Mate's fine, buddy.
I ain't your buddy friend. Yeah.
So I kind of made this point to him, and he was kind of like, yeah, fair play. But he kind of said it in a bit of a like, I ended this interaction feeling like by moving the knight into the bear that we were being scummy and that we'd come across as the scummy ones, whilst actually we were the ones playing Beornings. Like, do you know what I mean? It was like I felt like I had to stand up for us so that we didn't just have everything go against us. But then I ended up ending the match feeling like I had been the one who'd been the rules lawyer almost. Does that make sense?
For context, the Riv Knight was 8.5 inches away. So
I think
he was miles in.
I think he was 9.5. I don't think he was 8.
It was 8. I mean, yeah.
There were some other instances. So, for example, a heroic combat was called by Grimbjorn.
Oh, this was good.
Who then used barge, and then I was just like,
I think the fuck not.
Oh no, I was like.
So wait, he combated first, and then he was going to barge.
Then he used barge, and I was like, "You're using barge," and he was just like, "Yeah, we're gonna move Frodo," and I was just like, because this was with OT, so I was like, "Keep going," but I just want to check something, and I ended up looking at the rule book, and sure enough, you can't.
Literally says.
And I was like to them, I was like, it says you can't do that, and they were like, well, it says this was their argument, that if the heroic combat is successful, you can't do that. And I was kind of like, one, it doesn't say that. It says if you're participating, and two, your heroic combat was successful, you won the fight, you have now chosen not to attack Frodo. Just because Frodo didn't die doesn't mean anyway. So they were like, oh, fair enough, move everything back. And then they didn't call a heroic defense. That was annoying to me.
They changed their heroic?
No. I had called a heroic defense.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, I see.
This was why I was like a bit annoyed about it, because I was like, I have spent one of Frodo's quite precious at this point in the game for you to then kind of like deliberately choose to misunderstand a rule. And again, no rule book out. Just get your rule book out. Like,
you know what I think it is, and it's no disservice to the armies you two brought, but I genuinely think they probably looked at your army and thought
they could mug us off.
These guys are noobs.
It's fine.
We're gonna fucking just roll them over.
It's fine. I appreciate that, like, we didn't stand a chance in this army. We didn't really stand a chance against Azogs. But the thing that annoyed me is, like, I don't like, from what I saw, this like thing of it's up to your opponent to check that you're not misplaying.
Yeah, you need to know your own fucking rules.
And they were like, this is the first time we've played Beornings properly, and I was like, but this is the 4th game in the tournament, like.
Yeah. This really hasn't come up before.
And if you're unsure of monster rules, why don't you have the monster brutal power attacks with the little red ribbons so that you can go and check them? Like, actually look
that really handy ribbon.
So I don't want to like make this like I went to a competitive event and I hate that everyone who played against me played competitively. But these little things, I was a bit like, this is kind of like sucking the joy for a person who's never been to a tournament.
Yeah, the fact you're having to look out for what your opponent's doing.
I was kind of like, come on, like. But then, and also I felt like we were like trying our best to like play everything like really straight, and like if we made any mistakes, we were like immediately going, we've made a mistake, like this is what we've done. So like, for example, we lost out on victory points because I had measured Aragorn and gone, he's within 15 inches of an objective. And then when we properly measured it the next turn, he was 15 and a half. And I was like to them, I was like, okay, Aragorn can't make it, and that's fine. Like my mistake. And it was a bit kind of like, I felt like we were really willing to do that.
I think I would probably let you have that. Like, if you'd measured it to be in 15 the turn before and you'd said, I would have been like,
this is the thing. I kind of mentioned to OT, like when they weren't listening, as a joke, kind of like, shall I say that the table knocked it? Because like that was what they'd said about Bjorn, but I decided that I just couldn't be asked this point. I just didn't really care. I was just like, yeah, fine, okay. We lost by 2 more victory points, whatever.
It does sound like so far you've been playing certain characters of people at certain events, which, to be honest, in SBG, there's not an awful lot of, and I think you just got very.
I want to be clear. Our first 2 opponents were fine. And our third opponents were fine. They were just a bit cocky because I think that they were just like this list. But I actually didn't have a problem with the third opponents in terms of how they played. They were fine as well. And 4th opponents, like I wouldn't like say that like normally I would be like, you know, these people. It was just like a bit kind of like, I felt like gaming etiquette wise, I was a bit like, come on, like can we not?
I think generally, and like most from all the events I played, and even GBHL events, players tend to be much more forgiving and chill with the rules. But I have to say, like, it doesn't sound like you've played against certain like people who are like that much. Like, I think your sample has been very heavily concentrated as opposed to diluted, which is what you would have expected more of at a doubles event. But I think because it was 100 points, I think a lot more people were sort of getting in. But I also think, weirdly, in doubles, I even find myself getting more competitive because you're almost trying not to let down your partner.
And you're doing a lot of like talking with your partner rather than talking with them.
Well,
and it really creates a vibe of like us versus them. And like I'm gonna save my GB. I'm gonna save my rant until the end, so it's more easily cut outable if we decide it's unreleasable. So I'm not gonna do it now. But I enjoyed playing with Onod on this one because it was nice to have someone on my side of the table to talk stuff with. But the opponents I played at this one, I much prefer the ones I played at the other events, because that felt a lot less like, almost, it didn't feel like confrontational. That's not the right word, but
like you were playing a game together as opposed to
I think the issue was, me and OT had a conversation about this when we were driving home
in floods of tears.
Yeah, because the entire tournament was, we were chatting to each other and strategizing with each other. You therefore didn't really kind of get much of like an appreciation for what the opponents were kind of doing, and you didn't really talk to them about what you were doing in the game. And some games it was fine because we explained to each other a bit better. Like the first and second game, I think we were just a bit better at kind of saying like, this is what we're doing. Whilst I think by like the second day, sometimes it was a bit like people were doing stuff and everyone was going like, oh, what's this? So in this game against the Beornings, really good example, we rolled a courage test to charge for a Riv Knight.
Oh my god.
And they were like, what's that for?
And it didn't make it in. And then we were like talking to each other. We weren't actually moving any models. We were just talking about what we could do with other models. And repeatedly, one of the Beornings players kept saying to us, you can't move that model. He just failed his terror. And we were like, we know, we're not talking about him. We're talking about the other six Riv Knights and Elronds that are yet to move. And then we keep talking and we'd be like pointing at Elrond and he'd be like, you can't move that Riv Knight. It's like, yes. Do you not remember the conversation we just had? And it was a bit like that. It was a bit like I think because we were talking without our opponents were then like, what are they talking about? And I think certain people in those situations react in a sense of, I now need to step in and interfere and like intervene to make sure that we're not being screwed over. But it's like, we aren't trying to screw you over. Yeah. Like we're playing the game. Like we understand he's failed his courage test. We're not going to try and be a dick and go, oh, we were rolling.
The one thing people are going to assume looking at your list is that you're there to cheese them off, definitely.
Yes, definitely. And we played hyper competitively and never did anything.
For all of that, we got unbelievably close to nearly winning this game. Like really? Because if you'd flipped that objective, we'd have got 2 more points, and then if Elrond had won that charge in the center, we'd have flipped that objective, and then we actually would have been winning.
But also, if we're being brutally honest, both of our teams misheard the TO saying that we only had 20 minutes left, and so we actually accidentally ended this game about half an hour before everyone else. So if we're being brutally honest, if we continue playing for the full amount of time, they would have just swarmed the board and we'd have lost. So let's be frank, we came nowhere near to winning this.
I think you're being a bit pessimistic. No, I think we stood a better chance than you think we did.
We didn't. We were fucked. We got absolutely robbed. Like, absolutely destroyed.
Yeah. Bears are really good.
There you go. Bears are very good, and I don't think they really needed a Legendary Legion.
No.
The final thing that they tried to pull was they realized that Aragorn was going to pull this march, so they tried to stop him. He said, because of the new weight overlap, I will move my bet 8. I will then put him back into a man, and I will place him in combat. And I was like, right, okay. Before we even call the TO over to see whether that is legal because you can't charge him, let's just measure this rationally, okay? The base that the model is in is 1 inch. So let's say that you overlap 0.00001, whatever you want to call it. Like, let's say.
Thanks, Jake.
So it's an inch.
So it's an inch. Can you just measure the distance between the bear's base and Aragorn's base? And it was 9.5 inches. And I was like, so there is never going to be a situation where you can move 8 inches and get the overlap. And when I said that to him, he was like, yeah, fair enough. And I was like, common sense.
So it was all right. Like, I think actually we did realistically as well as we could have done given the scenario. Actually, like, we were maybe slightly unlucky to get like maybe a slightly less narrow loss, but we were never going to win this game, I don't think. Like, yeah, it was just a bit of a sad slog, this game, unfortunately.
Because like, even if we kill Grimbeorn, there were still so many Beornings.
And there's still Beorn on 3 wounds, 3 fate, and a 5-up save.
Like, we might have had like a better chance, but our Riv Knights just didn't have the numbers or the survivability to deal with that much. So it was just a bad matchup for us, and there you go.
Anyway, moving on.
I think the Bears, I mean, out of the 4 Bears we faced, we killed 1. And admittedly, it is the only one that we intentionally used our Golem King combo on, but it took 2 turns, and we didn't do a single wound on any other bear, I don't think. They just do what they want.
Yeah.
So yes, let's move on to our game 5 then. Our last game. So at this point, we're 3 wins and 1 loss, and we're really thinking, if we win this, we will come top 3 probably. We're oh yes, the scenario. This was quite funny. So our opponent really didn't want this scenario, and he went up to the TO and said, "So what scenario is it, mate?" And I'm only asking because I want this one. And because he wanted a specific scenario, the TO made him roll. And of course, he didn't roll the one that he wanted, and we ended up playing this one, which is not cornered. What's it called? Is it cornered? No.
Yeah, it is cornered.
It is cornered.
Is it no escape or something?
Oh, no escape.
Maybe?
That's it.
Yeah, you're right. It is
no escape. So in this one, also fortunately for us, we lost the choice of which table edge to go on.
You got to deploy after.
So we deployed after, which at first I was thinking, actually, I want to choose, because I didn't want them to go. You can see in the first image here, I didn't want them to go under that bridge. That's a bridge there between the 2 buildings. I thought they were going to deploy there, hot gate style, and just sit there. But actually, they deployed in front of it. And of course, if we deployed first, they would have just deployed on the opposite side, like away from the goblins.
Yeah.
So we were able to get a thin line in the front there. And our strategy for this, we actually deployed one of the mercenary groups on the table because there was a lot less terrain to be able to come out of with the mercenaries. We checked with the TO before the game because we knew it might be a point of contention. We asked, where can the goblins come out of here? Because obviously it talks about terrain pieces, and there's a fountain in the middle that we might be able to cheese our way onto coming out of, but we didn't want to do that. So we asked the TO, and the TO said basically any buildings. So the 2 buildings in the middle and the building at the back we could choose from. Building at the back, no point choosing it because our guys are going to run past it faster than they can spawn there. 2 buildings in the middle, potentially late game, we thought maybe we'll want some coming on there. No point deploying more mercenaries than we need because we're not going to be able to get them all in anyway. So we used March, because there's points on this one for, what was it? So if your leader, I don't have the book. Someone else tell me what it is.
You have to you get points for killing the enemy's leader of the primary force. You can either have 1 or 3, so 1 for wounding, 3 for killing. I believe you can get 2 VPs if you kill the leader of the secondary force.
Yeah.
Points for banner in this one, which is a massive issue because gambling's got a banner. So that's 1 if you've got 1, 2 if your opponent doesn't. So we were already starting with 2-0 down. And then you
points for breaking as well.
Points for breaking, yeah.
Yeah, so straight away we're 2-0 down. They've got, I should have said what they've brought. They have
Defenders of Helm's Deep.
Defenders of Helm's Deep with Theoden, the child, Legolas, Gamling, Gimli, and a bunch of dudes. Haleth. So Theoden and Legolas and Haleth are in the primary force that deploy directly opposite the goblins. And then Gimli and Gamling are bringing up the rear. So our strategy here was basically sandwich them as quickly as possible, try and kill them.
Flash kill and then turn around.
Yeah, so try and kill them just as quickly as possible. We needed to kill everything in the primary force, plus 1 model from the secondary force to break them. So that was our strategy. Unfortunately, we lost the first move off, which meant they pinned us against the wall. You can see in the second image, they pinned us against the wall, killed a load of trap guys. King came round, killed a couple of these. Scribe was quite useful this game because they were so close to the table edge. Like any goblins coming on could be immediately useful. I think we lost quite a few combats quite early on, and they managed to thin our force pretty quickly under the bridge. Obviously, hoping to sandwich us later on. Theoden didn't get any kills the whole game, I don't think, did he?
No, he did.
He did.
Theoden and Haleth throw out combat in the first.
Yes.
Try and kill some dudes, and yeah, so it was essentially a slow grind. We tried to do hurls with the Goblin King and that sort of stuff.
None of it really came off that well, did it?
No, it didn't really. We were just losing fights with the regular goblins, even though they were just fighting like 2 or 3 on ones.
Yeah, my rolls were atrocious this game.
They were pretty poor in comparison to what we were used to.
Yeah, you can see on the right there, the goblin captain, the tiny one with a little green band. That was our secondary forces leader, and we just used him to do 2 marches, and then he just hid the rest of the game. So really, the only things in this game are the fact they've got a banner. They've obviously got both their leaders, and we've got the king, and breaking. Those are the only points on offer. You get to image 3, and you can see we've now got loads of guys in. They were quite smart with their positioning. They were able to keep kind of a barrier enough that pretty much none of their guys were going to be trapped. And you can see now their secondary forces arriving, and just, I mean, Gimli and that lot just absolutely smashed through those goblins. We tried to slow them as much as we could, but we just couldn't kill them fast enough on this side. There was a couple of nice little, you can see in this one, actually, in slide 3, the Goblin King's about to hurl that dude through the combats to where Theoden and the man-child are, to stop them combating off a goblin. Actually, I think that's Grinner. So we managed to save Grinner. Our secondary force leader's obviously hiding behind the wall for the whole game. And our mercenaries, you can see in image 4, have now popped up behind them. They basically won another move off to move their guys back through the tunnel. They killed all the goblins between Theoden there and Gimli at the top, and just started moving backwards through the tunnel. Wasn't anything we could do about it, really. Yeah, like I said, we lost another move off, so we couldn't catch them, unfortunately. However, in doing that move, because of the positioning of some of the models, Gimli was pretty much out on his own, and we managed to pull off a cheeky combat with the king and Gollum and swing up into Gimli with, I think, 1 extra guy trapping him. Gimli called a strength because he couldn't do anything else, and we killed Gimli. So it's now 2-2. And our only chance at this point is to wound or kill Gamling. Oh no, Theoden. Sorry, wound or kill Theoden, or break them. And because of that, and because we're fairly sure that they'd be able to keep Theoden alive, like literally they were just going to hide him. Our only choice was to break them, and I mean, we brought the goblins on the building on the right there because we could try and gank those 2 goblins, those 2 elves.
To run away, and we lost the next move off again.
Yeah, I think we lost. We won 50-50 the whole game, I think.
Yeah.
And the last turn, you can see on the last slide.
Yeah.
So couple of interesting things happened here. The first was, so like Sebastian said, we lost this move off, and you can see the semicircle that they ran away from to stop us charging any of their models. Had we won the move off, like, we would have just charged in and killed loads. The Goblin King, I mean, you can see on the right, Legolas is in the bottom right, surrounded by about 10 goblins. Above him, there are like two Rohan models left. One of which, in the last turn, managed to win its combat.
Nice.
So
he was there for about 4 turns.
Yeah, Legolas won every combat he was in for the last 5 turns, I think, against like 10 goblins. And so massive whiffing from me on the right. And then I'll let you tell the rest, Sebastian.
So
how many models are we from breaking them at the beginning of the turn? I think it was 4.
At the beginning of the turn, we were 4 models away from breaking them, and at this point, time had been called, so we knew that this was the last turn. And because they'd won the move off, they essentially moved out of 6 inches, or out of 5 inches from most of our goblins, out of 6 inches from the Goblin King, Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see there are some ice bases. Those are some of the goblin mercenaries that come on the turn before. So we were able to get some fights in. So you've basically got Legolas, 2 warriors on the right-hand side. And
all fully surrounded by about 10 goblins each.
Yeah, and then we've got about 5 goblins. 5 combats.
Yeah.
In the bottom left.
I think 3 of which at least we've got full surrounds on.
Yeah, so we've got lots of traps. We've got lots of abilities there. We've got lots of availability to get kills. First combat, Legolas won again, so that's fine. And then I believe both of those Werehand warriors on the right hand side won their fight.
No, I think I killed the one right next to the king. I didn't kill the other one won his fight.
So one died there, and then we had all the combats in the bottom left hand corner. Our opponent was shielding with every model because they knew they couldn't win. They were just playing for the draw, and they were just trying to deny the break. Every combat. So out of about 6 combats, he had rolled a 6 without a banner reroll, and with 5 of them. So the one combat that I won down there, I managed to kill. But every other, and I wasn't even rolling that badly either. I was rolling like 5.
You were rolling 5s, yeah.
Consistently, really like strong dual rolls. But yeah, our opponents just managed to escape with 2. Like if we had killed 2 more models, Legolas, by the way, should have died about 4 turns earlier because he was ganked on by the King Gollum combo.
Oh yeah, I just massively whiffed, didn't I? Brilliant.
Out of 6 dice, you needed 3s. You rolled 1 3.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we just kind of left Legolas thinking, you know what, we need the king just going up there and killing dudes, but he didn't.
Yeah, our only VPs.
My one saving grace was the fact that even if the king had charged one of those warriors in the last turn, because we decided actually that we were probably going to kill that model and we didn't need the king in there, so we would just hurl a goblin at one of their warriors just to try and kill something. We didn't manage to, but I also didn't send him into that combat, and I didn't end up killing that model. So if I'd sent the Goblin King in, we probably would have killed that model, but we'd still be 1 away. So I would have been really annoyed if we were 2 away, but if we were 1 away, but we weren't. So unfortunately, yeah, a 2-2 draw, and we came 6th out of 30, which is still good. Like 6 out of 30 instead of 2nd out of 30 is still really good. Yeah, I mean, it was a good tactical game. Like I enjoyed how tactical it was, but also if like any amount of luck went our way, we would have won. Apart from the fact that it was obviously the scenario we wanted, and we got the deployment we wanted.
Yeah. Apart from
that, we were lucky in that respect. If it was the other game type,
the champions one, you'd have been stuffed.
Yeah, we'd have been in trouble.
It's the amalgamation of we had lots of luck before the game, but then I think there were 5 roll-offs. If any one of them had gone our way, I think we would have won the game.
Yeah. Okay. So you're game 5 then. How did this go? It looks like you're playing against Numenor.
Yeah, Numenor, Rivendell, Alliance, Gil-galad, Isildur, 1 knight who got shot off his horse turn 1, and then the rest of it was just a shield wall. So yeah, they're pretty bland. Yeah, we played all right, and then we lost. Essentially, like this one was just pretty depressing.
Anyway, so you lost that game.
Yeah, we did. And like this, I don't know. We took one picture of this game and it's blurry and out of focus. Like that kind of says all you need to know about this game. It wasn't very fun. Isildur with the ring is a real fucking problem. Jesus, he is so good with the ring. Like I don't actually know what you're supposed to do against him.
I mean, just take Sauron.
Well, yeah. I think my conclusion was you just wait till he runs out of might and hope he rolls 1 or 2 so that you can move him.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that once he ran out of might, we made a mistake, and I think also I was way too nice this game.
Yes, you were.
So, for example, I called a heroic defense with Frodo, and he called a heroic strength with Isildur, and I was like, and I explained to him, I was like, this is a bad idea. You should withdraw this before we roll dice, and so he did. Obviously, like at a GBHL 100 event, I probably should maybe if I wanted.
No, I think that was fine. I think that was fine.
I think I did the right thing.
You did,
but
you
I
did.
think
Yeah.
I think I did this a lot this game. Where
You did.
I was just kind of like constantly going like, basically like being very nice about like decisions and allowing them to like take things back and stuff. And we got a little bit of that in return, but like there wasn't really as much opportunities because we didn't do as many.
The most contentious moment where I felt like a prick was we said at the beginning of the game, if you roll a dice and it lands on a piece of terrain, it won't count. And they roll. So we did. It was Wrath of Bruno with Elrond. They rolled Nat 6, which is what they needed to resist. It landed completely flat, but on a piece of terrain. I was
that's fine.
And I but I said it, and then he was like, "Mate, that's flat." And then I was like,
"That's not what we agreed."
But then they had it. They let him have it.
The issue was the guy who had rolled it was not at the table when we agreed this. We agreed it with his team.
Oh God!
And so I was like, I cannot be asked to deal with this in the last game. So I just went to OT. I was just like, let's just let them have it, because I cannot be asked to get the TO over to have this pointless argument about what clearly is flat.
Yeah.
And we can just play it cocked like you know, it doesn't matter if we'll just do the balance of dice on top if that's what people are happier with.
Did you agree with all your opponents in each game how you were going to deal with cocked dice?
We did with all of them, and this was the only one where it was an issue, and it was because the guy turned up after the game had started, and it was like, if you had turned up before the game had started, this wouldn't have been a problem. And obviously it was a bit of an issue because for him, I can imagine he was just thinking like, fuck off. That is flat. What the fuck are you on about? Like, and OT was going like, well, this is what we agreed before the game, and his teammate was kind of sitting there not really saying anything, and I was kind of going, oh, can we just...
His teammate in that scenario should have just been like, yeah, we did say before the game, sorry mate.
Can we just fucking end this game, please?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the important things before the game to agree, and I guess that's a lesson, an unfortunate lesson learned. I know that partway through our game with the dwarf elf list that we crushed, I remember we hadn't said anything yet, but the first few rolls of the game, dice were landing on terrain, and I can't remember who it favoured, but I remember being like, that looks cocked and it's on terrain, but we haven't said anything yet. So after that, as we started the game, I was like, just before we roll any more dice, can we just agree what is cocked?
What's going on?
And we were like, if it's on any terrain, it's cocked.
This is what I really liked about the third opponents, because whilst they were very overconfident, they were so good on this stuff. They were
literally. We didn't even have to say anything. They were just like, it's on a piece of terrain, re-roll it, and it was like
they were ruthless about it with themselves. They were like, that is
you've got to be. You can't.
That is touching a piece of terrain. I'm re-rolling this, even though I just rolled well. And it was like, I liked that, and I was really happy playing like that. And I did not like any of the games where we were like, let's balance the dice. I was like, because the bear guys were like, let's do the balance of dice, and I was like, let's just do that thing. But there you go.
Because there's still room for like human error there, isn't there?
Exactly.
And also, what if you knock the dice when you're putting the dice on it?
And what if you've got slippery dice?
Yeah. What if you've got those special high resistance dice for exactly this scenario?
What if you have rubber dice that grip, or magnetic dice?
Wow, that's the future.
Then you're probably cheating.
That's where the meta is going. Right, summary. Let's move on.
Your summary then first.
We lost that game, by the way.
We could tell from
Fucking
the beginning
painful.
where you refused to start talking about the game.
Yeah. Our overview. Don't go to a GBHL 100 event with a fun
Period.
list. Yeah, or just don't go. Definitely don't go if it's your first ever tournament.
As you found out.
That would
I mean,
be my
also,
feedback.
really don't go if you don't care about GBHL points, which is the main reason everybody else is there, because it really nullifies the point of fucking going.
Yeah, for us, we were just like, there was like everyone was clearly just there to like try and pick up points, and we were just like, can we just play a game of SBG against like a list that isn't the meta? I get
Yeah.
that.
I mean, the fact that we hit the trifecta, in my opinion, of Azog, fucking Dragon Emperor, and the Bears. Holy moly, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we did do better than your prediction.
We predicted 5 losses, a win, a draw, and 3 losses. And I think yeah.
If the tournament ended after day one, we'd probably both been pretty fucking like riding high in terms of like how the tournament went. Like day 2 was definitely like the feel bad day.
Yeah. I think we actually did as much as we realistically could have done with our list. Like I think our list was severely limited in some aspects, and I think we did fairly well to like nullify our weaknesses. We just didn't have the same strengths that other people have.
I actually think we kind of pushed our list to the limits of what it could achieve in a lot of these games. Like we did all the shenanigans. We did all of the like free hero combats. We used the ring effectively to deal with like heroes.
Some nice wraths.
We were using Aragorn's might. Like there were only a couple of times where we wasted a turn with Aragorn's free might. We got some cheeky little Wrath of Beornings off. Although the Wrath of Beornings was not as good, we actually didn't end up using it as much. So I think we were planning on, because I think we were thinking 2 Wraths with a load of cav, like we'll get a lot of good use out of this. But it was more situational. And it was just like the list. Just if you're bringing Merry and Pippin,
you're not gonna win.
Yeah, you're not gonna win, and that's fine. We did better than we thought. In terms then of our tier list,
this is probably the high point. This is the bit I'm most looking forward to.
This is going to be controversial.
Yeah.
It'll be on screen. People will be able to see. We're putting Frodo and Sam in Fantastic. They were by far the most useful models in the list consistently in every single game.
For their points.
But for their points, of course.
Not the most period, but like, yeah.
There wasn't a game that they weren't useful. Game 1, they capped an objective, and you couldn't knock Frodo off because he put the ring, and you just put hobbits around him so that he can't move. Fantastic. Yep. And if they kill the other hobbits, who cares? Game 2, we used their might, and we were able to, if we'd had an additional turn, obviously like Glorfindel was on his last legs, and we were using them to call moves. Game 3, we used them to take out Azog. We used them to take out the Necromancer. Game 4, they were basically the reason why we scored any points in that game was heroic defensing and heroic moving with both of them. Well, heroic defense with Frodo, heroic moving with Sam. And game 5, again, like this was the only game that Frodo wasn't useful in, but Sam still was good because we got the free hero combats. And yeeting Aragorn using a free hero combat where he then has to waste his free might point, so he can either use it to kill or he can use it to call a strike. It's really, really useful. And having the ring is just really, really useful. They were genuinely just such useful little toolboxes in this list. Yeah. And we also put in
Riv Knight.
Riv Knights.
So good. Like not all the time, but just as like an overall package, they're just so useful. And like, I think people fear them a bit more than they should because they're worried about like the high roll potential. But like, I mean, in, for instance, the third game where I just stacked up my 8 knights with the army bonus every turn, like it did feel really, really powerful. And yeah, on the turns we lined up charges, like those lances are brutal. Like it really showed against the elves actually, like the difference in killing power, where they were just letting us get those heroic moves every turn and just charging in every time. Like that, the other elves just disintegrated, even though they were shielding and stuff. It was just bam.
We didn't really point this out at the time, but they made the decision to use Galadriel's might to call heroic defenses rather than moves, and it was a bit like wouldn't have done that myself. But they were like chatting with each. It wasn't like they were unaware. They were chatting with each other and going like, I don't think I want to call a heroic move. I want to save my might. So it wasn't like we were going like, we won't tell them about this. But
Elrond was fine. He only actually died in one game. We only actually took a wound in one game. But that was the game he died in. Like, I don't know. He just it seems to be the way. He either goes through the game like not a blemish on him, or he dies. And that seems to be the way it goes. Like, I really back him as just a roadblock. Like, I don't think maybe charging him in to like solo half of the Eastling army wasn't the way to go, but he actually clung on for like 3 turns.
I think the issue
re-rolling fate is nuts. Like,
I think the issue was that he was our leader.
Yeah.
And that's what started being fantastic. It was like, if he wasn't our leader, then he would have been fantastic.
But yeah, really good. Same with Aragorn. Like, I think Aragorn on the games he was rolling hot, like 4 attacks on the charge really does kill shit very quickly. And having those little bits of might to like manipulate dice rolls and accuracies and all that stuff, so useful.
I mean, the first day, all of his games, he was like obliterating, like consistently, like taking out like multiple Eastlings, taking out heroes. He was really good at maneuvering. He was doing everything, and then he rolled that quadruple 1.
Yeah, and then it just fell apart
at the end of the first day, and then second day he was not very useful.
No.
So
he actually died, didn't he, in the final game?
Isildur killed him.
Despite heroic defense.
I heroic defense, and Isildur and some others who trapped him still killed him, and I was like, fantastic, great. So
the banner, you need a banner in a Rivnite army above anything more than like 400 or 500 points. Just like getting rerolls on the charge is really nice. Occasionally useful for VPs, but that's not actually come up a lot. Arwen was a bit weird. Like, I don't know how I feel about Arwen.
She only really earned her points in the first game by capping an objective.
Yeah.
The rest of the game, she was just another Rivnite who didn't have a bow.
You mean the 17-inch movement and Wrath of Brunnen wasn't useful?
Wasn't. I think we ran into some unfortunate armies who just kept on having resistance to magic. And I appreciate that at this kind of event, you are going to deliberately bring armies that have that as a bonus, but it was a bit kind of like,
Yeah, well, she's not that good anyway. Let her have it.
Yeah, Beornings, Lothlorien, and Numenor. We actually faced 3 armies that were resistant to magic. Bill was king of our hearts, but a little underwhelming.
I think we've actually probably been a bit harsh. I think by virtue of the fact that he wounded Azog,
or nearly did,
he's probably up. I think just for the points that he probably earned all of his points back just doing that. The main issue with we did get Hobbit banner rerolls a couple of times in the game. That was useful. The main issue with Bill is the main reason that he was there was to give Arwen and Aragorn might and will back, and he failed miserably in his job. It only worked.
He did it twice all weekend.
And I was maneuvering this to do it as many times as possible. Like if I could organize a move so that someone could try and get a might point, I was like, might as well, and it never happened.
Nice.
Thank you. Just like I couldn't roll a 5 up to save a life. I was just like, and he's done nothing again. Oh, and he's done nothing again. Oh, and like, but it's weird because I feel like if I'd rolled like, if Aragorn had got a couple of might back in a couple of those games, I'd have been putting Bill in fantastic up with Frodo and Sam.
Because actually, that's all you need to do. Because he's so cheap. If he gives you like 1 might point back, he's probably worth it. Like,
yeah,
or even like a couple of Will on Arwen would be super nice. Like just another Wrath. But yeah, it didn't happen.
I think it's a shame that he can only do it with 1 model a turn, because I don't think it's broken. It's not like gambling where it's an auto give back and where it's a 3-inch bubble. You have to be in base contact with him, and you have to end your move in base contact with him, so he can't move
That's the
into
big
you.
one,
yeah.
So it's a bit like it's not. So like I don't think it would have been unreasonable for me to have gone, I'm going to have to crowd all my members of the fellowship round to try and gain some stuff back from him. And then I can actually roll more than once a turn, and, you know, over the course of the game, I'll actually get it sometimes.
Merry and Pippin were awful.
Oh, God, so bad.
I mean, they're just hobbits, so yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I think actually, I can't remember which one it was. One of them managed to somehow stall Bjorn for a turn. God knows how.
But I mean, their other significant contribution was falling from a tower and dying.
Yeah,
like it was
their weekend involved running very slowly across a board to sit on an objective, falling off a tower and dying, getting just
obliterated.
charging the necromancer so that he counted as being trapped, dying. And then sitting behind a building because we couldn't really think of anything useful to do with them before being killed by an elf. And that was what Merry and Pippin did all weekend. And it was just like,
we were saying they would be.
I'm glad.
How can we make them better? Like, didn't we say give them a might point and make them like 15 or something? Like, just give them like something, because they currently just run around with 0 might, 0 will, and a fate point. And literally their existence is, did you roll a 4 up on the fate point? No, you didn't. Okay. Rip. Like,
or even they can gain a might point from Bill that they didn't start with. So at least you can then be rolling with Bill before everyone else has started using their resources to try and get something from him. But yeah, I mean, I took them for the fluff. Honestly, a Mithril Coat on Frodo would have been a better use of points.
Yeah. And then I see your self-esteem's down there as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty bleak.
Nice. Well, should we do our summary then? My and Sebastian's summary. As insert clip here, if available, of me literally saying 3 wins and 2 losses, maybe 3 wins, a draw and a loss, probably. That's exactly what we got. 3 wins, a draw and a loss. I think I just have a feel for the goblins at this point. It's
like feeling his 3 inches.
So we came 6, which is good, but not as good as second. Goblins very strong, can struggle in particular scenarios which we know about, or certain armies which we struggled against. We lost against just a solid Gondor army, drew against an army that we got a bit unlucky with. But I think really we drew against the army that we were scared of the second most after the Gondor army, I would say. What do you think, Sebastian? Out of all the armies we faced, I think I was most scared of the Gondor, second most of the Rohan, probably.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other scenarios were all objective based as well, but the actual armies themselves, I think goblins really struggle against.
Yeah.
When your opponent also has a fair amount of numbers, because at that points level, you can really use the terrain against the goblins. So the goblins just kind of have that difficulty of coming around them with 5-inch move as well.
Yeah.
And like when your opponent has that many models with banner rerolls as well, when you've got 3 dice every turn, you're gonna roll a 5 or a 6. So the fight 2 of the goblins just suddenly actually really does hurt, because you're not potentially rolling that 6, and your opponent is normally going to roll a 5 or a 6 and beat you on 5 value. So they were the scariest lists for me, just purely because they actually had an army, whereas the other lists, they had a lot less models, and it was all objective scenarios.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we faced the Gondor army on an objective, we probably would have won. If we'd faced
it was quite hard.
Yeah. But regardless, I'm retrospectively, I guess, happy about the outcome.
You guys did really well.
Yeah. I feel like goblins are almost anti-meta. I mean, we beat all the bears we played.
You get fucked up by
admittedly on
Easterlings.
objectives. We did get we would have been fucked by Eastlings potentially.
It's just shield walls presumably are just problematic, like
because you can't get around them. Like if they just take up a position, it's the one army I lost against in Cardiff. Like, well, apart from the bullshit game I lost, but yeah, shield walls are hard for goblins to get around. You just can't. Yeah. There's just no way
because you don't have like, I mean, aside from your mercs, I guess you don't really have like a flanking or like a maneuverable force. It literally is just you throw your forces at the wall, and if it breaks, it breaks, and if it doesn't,
yeah,
kind of
I mean,
lose.
The key is to get us around. So use the mercs for that. Use the scribe goblins. Use marches with captains to get around. But if you can't get around, then you're screwed pretty much. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Should we look at your tier list?
Yeah.
Similar to last time.
Yeah, so basically, King is always going to be excellent. Goblins, I mean, they're just excellent because you can take so many of them. And the mercs, I think, really helped in some of the scenarios. And because they're basically just more goblins, they're never going to be bad to take. It's just like a little tax to make a proportion of your force appear in the right place. I don't think any of their defense really helped us at any point, did it? I don't remember ever thinking, "Oh, their defense 4, that helps."
I think in the game against the Helm's Deep, it was quite useful because we could put them at the front rank because
for the bows,
the Rohirrim was strength 3 and the bows was strength 3 from the elves, so it just made it 5s rather than 4s.
Yeah, that's true. Then we've got Grinner and Gollum. Grinner, we didn't use swap with me at all. We never used it.
Didn't need to.
No, well, the only time the Goblin King died was because I completely whiffed his blubbery mass. Every other game, he was just doing whatever he wanted, basically. But having a 3 might captain is always useful. So, and I think I almost whipped someone to death. I could have mited it maybe, but decided not to.
There was a situation where we ran into a sentinel, and you whipped him and you hit, and then you failed to win. But I said just spend a might because it's worth killing a sentinel.
Oh yeah, I did might it. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, so whip came off for once. Gollum helped us kill Gimli, which gave us a draw, and he also helped us gank a bear.
Apart from that, it was kind of all right. Like he lingered quite a lot in the games.
Yeah.
His impact wasn't as big as we wanted it to be, but I also think it didn't really need to be. So in the games where we used him, it was almost like an extra, except for Gimli. But then it felt very like the Goblin King probably still could have killed Gimli by himself.
It would have come to a 50-50 probably. And also, he helped us kill the King's Champion as well. So,
the game was won by that point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, in one game, he helped us get a draw. In 2 games, he just made a massive win even bigger. And in the other 2 games, he couldn't help. But he's the same cost as a captain, but he has the ring and 1 less might, basically. And he's a little bit better in combat. So I think he's definitely worth it. But yeah. So fairly solid. And then average captains, I mean, they're never really going to do too much. They're there to use might for marches, aren't they? And the scribe, I don't know. I used to think the scribe was basically the best model in Goblin Town. Now that I've taken mercenaries, I feel like I wouldn't take the scribe unless I'm playing 700 points plus, because the freedom you get with mercenaries is way better. It's guaranteed models where you want them, whereas the scribe, I mean, you might not get any models. You might just get none, period, or they might never make it to combat or be useful. And because he's 50 points, I don't think he even brought that many points worth of goblins on in any of our games. I don't think there were a couple of games where we got like 7 models on at one point. But I mean, unless you're really high points.
I do think that the captain is a lot better, as in the mercenary captain, in terms of you get to put them in the middle of a board as opposed to on a board edge, and sometimes that's actually a lot more useful because you've got more room to.
Your opponent can't hide from anywhere, really.
It also gives you 2 extra might and another person who can march, whereas you're putting 50 points into him, but you don't get any actual benefit.
He's just goblin models that might come on from a board edge. That's all he is. So yeah.
That was a long episode.
Yeah.
I think depressingly, it won't actually be as long as some of our recent episodes. I think it might cut down quite nicely.
I'm gonna have to cut out quite a bit of what I said, aren't I? Yes. I don't really know what to say. I think the moral of this tournament was, if you want to go to tournaments, don't just bring the meta list, because you might end up being the team who brings Beornings and then has to play Beornings 3 times out of your 5 games.
You do deserve that though if you bring Beornings.
Yes, you are in some sort of like purgatory for that, and there you go. So there we go. Well done to Mary and Sebastian for finishing pretty high up.
Thanks. And
well done to the heroes, the winning team who didn't bring fucking Beornings or Eastlings, but had like Farharad. Good, right. So
isn't 2 viewers like 50% of your audience?
Wow.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Please unsubscribe.
But ding the bell.
ding the bell, then unsubscribe.
So you can remember to dislike the video.
Yeah. We're gonna have more people added to the one person who turns up to dislike all our videos. It'll just be like a host of people now. Ciao.
Have a good weekend.
There's the energy.
Bye.
Thanks, Sebastian, for showing up again.
You're welcome.
We love you. Well,
as soon as we make some revenue, you'll get your quarter share. But
we'll have this conversation.
You can't split a penny 4 ways.
We'll have this conversation when Mayor's not in the call. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Good.
Thanks.
No problem. Q rants. This is what we're waiting for.
See, the problem with GBHL for me,